This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here he is, the host of the podcast, AWR Hawkins.
Folks, welcome to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast focused on guns, gun rights, Second Amendment. Look, we're going to come out right out of the chute this week, launch the podcast by talking to Will Riley. He is the senior at Carlsbad High School in New Mexico, who organized the Stand for the Second event that took place May 2nd. And he had students at over 300 schools in the country pledge to take part in it. Many of them did. We covered that at Breitbart, but I don't want to run ahead of Will. I want to let him speak for himself on these matters. So, Will, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us something about Stand for the Second? What was it that drove you to do this, to organize this day?
Well, I would say that really what drove me to action here was, I saw the response of the mainstream media to the movements of my peers, the March for Our Lives and the Enough walkouts on the National Day of Action. And I saw how the media was responding to that by creating this false narrative that my generation is somehow united behind gun control. And so I wanted to dispel that myth. I thought it was especially important to do that because I saw that, that emboldens former Supreme Court Justice Stevens to come out and call for the full repeal of the Second Amendment.
Now, we've seen numerous reports that, and to me, I'm going to be honest, Will, this makes it even more impressive, that you're not even a gun owner. But it's your love, your dedication, your fealty to our founding principles that drives you on this matter. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I would say, for me, this isn't about getting to go to the range. This isn't about hunting. I'm not a hunter. This is about, people's rights. This is about human rights. And I think people often forget that there is a human right to defend yourself from a tyrannical government. Right
on. Now tell me this. Some people have asked me this. Of course, I can't answer it, but you can. How did you go about this? How do you get people from 300 different schools to pledge? You're in New Mexico. It wouldn't matter which state you're in, but I'm saying you're in New Mexico. How do you get students in all these other states to come alongside you and say, yeah, we'll take part?
Well, we mostly used Twitter to promote ourselves at first. It was, and actually we ended up with over 500 schools registered with us. But we mostly used Twitter at first, and it was hard as time went on because it definitely seems like Twitter was making our stuff harder to find. I had a lot of people tell me, I'm searching for your exact handle and it's not coming up and things like that. But we really got off the ground through Twitter.
And I know you had a magnificent website. I went to the site. Appreciated your Jefferson quotes and other things. And with Jefferson, and you know this, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, but if you read him enough to kind of soak him up, you understand something you said earlier is precisely of Jefferson's mind, that these natural rights we possess, they're human rights, they're so intertwined in who we are that they're literally part of our humanity. And if you take one of those rights away, be it right to keep and bear arms, free speech, whatever it is, if you take that right away, you literally strip that much of our humanity from us. That was Jefferson's view, and it seems to me that view has taken hold in you.
Absolutely. I think that, my view, I think that my political views are very similar to a Jefferson. I'm very concerned with, natural rights and the constitutional protections thereof.
Now, what do you plan to do, Will, after school? I mean, what's your next step?
Well, next year I plan on attending college at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia.
That's awesome.
I plan on doing their philosophy, politics, and economics program there, and I do want to be involved with politics in the future.
That is awesome. Well, Will, I want to thank you for the time you made to be with us today. And in all seriousness, God bless you in what you're doing. And I hope that this Stand for the Second is the first of many. It's not the one and only. That's what we hope. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
Folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, Breitbart News podcast. Listen, this week I was at the NRA annual meetings, and I was able to make a new friend, and we had a great weekend. Drew Matich, and he's a producer in Hollywood, and so the fact that he's in that town, and here he was at the annual meetings, we had a blast. We looked at all kinds of guns, firearm accessories, holsters. We had a good time, and I thought it would be great to have him on the podcast to let him speak, where you all could hear him and hear his worldview and where he is from his own lips. So, Drew, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. It was a great weekend. It really was.
Now, Drew, I know that you are the producer of The Brave, and I know you've done your first season. You're waiting on your second season. But I don't want to try to sum up things too much because I will make a mistake. So why don't you let us know, where are you, what is it that you do, and what are you waiting on right now?
I work as a producer in Hollywood, mostly in the area of post-production. So I oversee all the editorial, visual effects, sound, music, all the things like that. A lot of talk back and forth with production to make sure that they do things, the right way for us to be able to finish the show effectively. And it's a great gig, and The Brave has been probably the best job I've had, that I can remember, just because of the people I was working with and the content of the show.
And that brings me. Let me ask this question, and this will be good for the audience. How do you describe The Brave? How do you describe that show? And the reason I ask you that, perhaps the audience members who haven't seen it are wondering, is that a show for me? So how do you describe that show?
Well, it's one of the three sort of, air quotes, military dramas that the network's brought out this year. And this one is about a special ops unit that goes all around the world and taking care of, essentially a national security issue every week. And, in the course of doing that, we went to countries like the Ukraine and Nigeria, and we went to Paris, France, and we went to Tehran, Vienna, Austria, Turkey. I mean, all over the world, Mexico. And all of that was done using Albuquerque, New Mexico as the place we had to double for all of those locales. It was pretty amazing when you see the show. The mix of visual effects and stock footage and some really good location choices really made it convincing, I think. Wow. And each week they solve a national security issue, and the show is, I think, unflinching in its appreciation of the military.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Drew, let me ask you a couple of questions that our listeners can really sink their teeth in. And the first of those two is, what's it like to be a conservative? Just generally speaking, what's it like to be a conservative who is employed in Hollywood?
I mean, it's all about reading the room. I mean, I personally have never worked on. I mean, most of the shows that I've worked on, I've never really run into the problem because just person to person, people are pretty tolerant, and I'm not one who brings it up. But if it does come up in conversation, most of the time I'll throw a question back or make it maybe I'm not in agreement, but I won't make a big deal out of it.
Right.
And I don't think, to my knowledge, I've never been discriminated against, but you don't know what happens behind your back, and it's like I said, it's all about just kind of reading the room. I've worked on shows where I've heard people speak incredibly hatefully, and that I just make the mental note, and I'd say, okay, well, after this pilot, I think I will be out and I'll do something else.
Right.
So it's a matter of kind of about picking the people who you're with.
Right. Well, now let's go to this question. What's it like to be there and to be pro-gun? I mean, to me, the willingness to be supportive of the Second Amendment just seems like that would really put you in a tough place in the community in which you live and work and do what you do. So what's it like in that way?
I know people on the left who love to go shooting, and I don't really get into the discussion of the politics of it with them, because it's to me it's just sort of one step at a time. And if somebody likes to go shooting, you go shooting with them. And hopefully over the course of time they put together the idea that maybe the powers that be in California don't really want us to go shooting. And it's just a question of how important that is to them. And you do the best you can, but it's a tough place. It's a tough place to be pro-gun.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this isn't to put you on the spot, and I promise you would never try to do that. But if you're comfortable with it, what was your takeaway from the NRA annual meetings? I mean, I can't remember if that was your first NRA annual meetings or not. I feel like it was. And if so, what was your takeaway? Just not as the producer, not as the Hollywood resident or the California resident, but just as an American. What was your takeaway from the annual meetings?
From a completely selfish standpoint, you and I talked about this. Being from California, it was a place where I saw all sorts of things that I will never be able to have in California because of the regulations.
Right.
But bigger picture, it was normal Americans at this place. It wasn't extremists. It wasn't it wasn't gung ho gun people the way the press has portrayed them to be. It's normal Americans who appreciate their rights. Right. And I mentioned to you yesterday that the more pushback or the more pushing I see from the anti-gunners out there, it's not gonna cow these people. It's gonna make them push back harder.
That's pretty awesome. Well, Drew, thanks for making time to be with us. I know that you and I are talking. We're 1,000 miles apart now, and appreciate you making time on your busy schedule. And folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, and we're going to be back right after this. Hey folks, I want to tell you about Breitbart News' Second Amendment newsletter, Downrange with AWR Hawkins. Features the top gun stories of the week every week, and guest columnists like Gun Owners of America's Larry Pratt or Armed American Radio's Mark Walters. Also features a review of a firearm or a firearm accessory each week. The newsletter downloads on Thursday, comes right to your email inbox. You can subscribe at Breitbart.com/AWR.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Hey folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. So we did the podcast kind of backward this week compared to how we usually do it. I started with two guests, and now I end with discussing the news of the week and where we stand as far as our Second Amendment goes. And as I talked about there, as I discussed with Drew, I just spent time at the NRA annual meetings, and let me just tell you, when President Trump gave his speech at those meetings, he lit the place up. And there are a couple of things he said that are worth spending time discussing, dissecting, stressing. And I want to talk about those things. Number one, he said very clearly that our rights come from God, not from government. And he made a quick application that this means government can't take them away. Folks, that is so fundamental to understanding liberty and freedom in America. You know, it was Thomas Jefferson who wrote that we were in possession of certain inalienable rights, that those rights they'd come to us how? By our Creator, that we were endowed by our Creator. And so Trump returned to that theme, and it's so important. There's a reason the left does not teach that our rights come from God, and it's because if we understand that, then we do understand what Trump said, that government can't take them away. Government cannot take away what it lacks the power to give. That's the point. That was Jefferson's point. That was why the founders were breaking from King George. They were breaking from him because he was violating that which was not his to violate. He was claiming an end to that which he had no power to end. And so Jefferson was saying, look, folks, we have certain rights that don't come from a government. We have certain rights that come from God, and those rights are off limits to government interference. And Trump rang the same bell at the NRA convention, and it was off the charts. And so we return to the fundamental philosophy, the understanding that our rights come from God, not from government. Now, something else Trump said, which is very important, and this is a paraphrase, but Trump made clear that you trust the people with guns as part of trusting them with freedom. Now, this makes sense when you understand that the source of the people's freedom is the same as the source of the people's rights. God, our Creator. When you understand that, nothing Trump said seems out there or quote unquote extreme. Trusting people with guns is part of trusting them with freedom. This is how Trump spoke when he spoke at the NRA annual meetings. And he was making his point on trusting people with guns and freedom as part of his point on trusting teachers to be armed to defend their students. Trump said that we have to give teachers a chance, at least give them a chance. Those words are both profound and some of the saddest words I've ever heard in my life, because they make me think of all the teachers who haven't had a chance, including the teachers at Parkland, the teachers at Sandy Hook. They were working in gun-free zones and they didn't have a chance. And Trump says, we got to do it different. We can trust these people. They love their students. They will defend their students. We can trust them to use firearms in the right way. Folks, you can't argue with what he's saying. And if you know someone who's a teacher especially, how could you ever argue? Because to continue to fight for a gun-free zone is to continue to fight for their lives to be in peril. Surely we're better than that, aren't we? Aren't we better than that? Now, Trump also, after making these great points, talking about the source of freedom, the source of our rights, the importance of exercising freedom, of exercising our rights. After doing all this, Trump comes to the end of his speech to talk about the battle between General Santa Anna and the people of Gonzales, Texas. Now, some of you who may not be rooted in Texas history may not know about that. 1835, Santa Anna demanded that the people of Gonzales turn over their cannon, hand it over to him. He was confiscating their cannon. That's what it boils down to. And Trump made the point, and correctly. He said the people of Gonzales wouldn't hand that cannon over. They wouldn't, because it was their only means of self-defense. And so, when Santa Anna sent all of his men to get that cannon, they were met with numerous Texans who had traveled to be in Gonzales to defend that cannon, to defend their right to self-defense. And those Texans raised a banner. That banner was a white flag with the image of that cannon on it. And written on that flag was, "Come and take it." And Trump looked at that audience at the NRA annual meetings and he said, come and take it. And he stressed that the American people will die before they give up their freedom. He took the Texas example and applied it to all of America. And he said Americans will die before they surrender. They will die before they give up their freedom. Folks, the man was on fire. He was the Trump who ran for office. He was the Trump for whom you voted, for whom I voted. I could not have been more proud of President Trump. Now, also at the convention, I had time to speak with Representative Richard Hudson. Representative Richard Hudson is the sponsor of the national reciprocity legislation that passed the House last year. He introduced it on January 3rd, 2017. It passed the House on December 6th, 2017. And it is stalled. After passing the House, it's stalled in the Senate, and I spoke to him about it. And I'll be honest, folks, my takeaway was that concealed carry reciprocity will pass only if the people rally, only if you write your senators, you call your senators, you email your senators, only then will we gain the momentum to have it passed. Now, here's the sad part. Passing it would be a breeze for this reason. We have red state Democrats who have to run for re-election in 2018. They cannot afford to vote against concealed carry reciprocity. It's a no-brainer. But there's no motivation. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I don't know if he was watching Gilligan Island reruns or Heart to Heart or whatever he's doing, but he's not thinking about reciprocity. And so the people are going to have to motivate him by flooding his office with letters and emails and phone calls. That's the only way we're going to get it done, folks. Not only flood Senator McConnell's office, but your prospective senators too, or your respective senators too, excuse me. That's what we have to do if we want to get national reciprocity passed. I was convinced of it as I spoke with Representative Richard Hudson. And for those of you in North Carolina 8, let me just say this. Richard Hudson is the real deal. You folks have elected a real pro-gun representative. He is fighting for Second Amendment rights. I just want to say it. It's evident in the way he talks. It's evident in the things he's trying to do. It's evident in the relationships he's trying to form to help get the momentum to get this bill through the Senate. And so I want to say that about him. Rep. Richard Hudson is the real deal. Now, folks, I also spoke with Kyle Kashuf during the NRA convention. He walked into the press room, and there I was typing, and there he was standing. I'm like, Kyle. He's like, AWR. We talked, and look, this kid is so common sense. And if you go to the Breitbart Facebook page, you can see a Breitbart Live video that I did with him. But we talked about things, and you know, he stressed the fact that there are a lot of agendas being pushed right now, and most of them are gun control agendas or anti-gun agendas, but there's not a lot of things being pushed that would actually make students safe. And this is the thing about him. Now, he's been suppressed somewhat by the establishment media, but he has still found his avenues to get his voice heard. And when he's heard, he gains a larger following every time because he has so much to say. So, folks, I invite you to go to the Breitbart Facebook page and look up the video I did with Kyle. Listen to him talk about things we need to do, just incredible stuff. And what a voice of reason. What a voice of reason in a world that is otherwise riddled with agenda-driven fools. And I say it that way on purpose. Now, folks, this week was not Dick's Sporting Goods' best week. Let's put it that way. Let's transition to Dick's Sporting Goods. You'll remember Dick's Sporting Goods. After the Parkland shooting, I believe it was 10 days afterward, they came out, roughly 10, they came out, and they were not going to sell, quote-unquote, assault rifles anymore. We're done. Not going to do it. And so there they are. So they're not going to do it anymore. Of course, that's the second time they said that. They said it after Sandy Hook. But we mean it this time. And so what they did is they pulled all the assault rifles off their shelves. They pulled off all their high-capacity magazines, too. You don't need those magazines. They're dangerous. So they pulled those off. And then what do? Instead of sending them back to manufacturers, they destroy them. They destroy them. It's almost like adding insult to injury. Now, they had plenty of options. They could have sold those to poor residents. They could have given them. If they're just going to destroy them, they could have given them to poorer residents in some of our larger cities so those residents could have defended their families. They could have sold them to police departments. I mean, there are a number of things they could have done, but to make a point, they destroyed them. Then, let's go a little further. Then they hired lobbyists to lobby Congress for gun control. Again, this is Dick's Sporting Goods. Dick's. I mean, I can't get over it. And it looks like you're going, well, you know, it looks like that they're of course losing support among the gun community, but there's been no real pronounced resistance. And then boom, Springfield Armory, the renowned pistol and rifle maker, pops up, and they made clear, we will not work with Dick's anymore. That, in other words, Dick's is not going to sell their product anymore. They're not going to have that option. So Springfield Armory cut ties with them. One day later, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, NSSF, the sponsor of the SHOT Show, they ejected Dick's Sporting Goods from membership, expelled them, if you will. And so Dick's is facing blowback for this gun control pursuit, for this assault on the Second Amendment. And it's good to see it. It's good to see people standing up in the gun industry, not letting a company like Dick's malign the Second Amendment, malign law-abiding gun owners with no type of ramifications. And so they are facing ramifications, and odds are they're going to face more rather than less as other companies follow Springfield Armory and follow organizations like NSSF. Now, speaking of parting ways with people, during the NRA convention, this is the craziest thing. During the NRA convention, there was a restaurant in Dallas called Ellen's that on the bottom of their receipts on the first day of the convention, the bottom of their receipts, they told customers, thanks for coming in here. We're going to donate part of the proceeds from your payment to groups that are pursuing reasonable and effective gun controls. What? It was on the receipt, so they get you after the fact. We suckered you. You spent your money. Now we're going to use it for gun control. Well, people let the NRA know. Pictures of the receipts were sent in. Pictures of the receipts went viral, to be honest with you. And the NRA issued a tweet and warned members to, quote unquote, steer clear of Ellen's. And they posted a picture of the receipt and the clear message that Ellen's had put forward. Well, the backlash was immediate. And Ellen's responded to the backlash by saying, wait, we're not anti-Second Amendment. Matter of fact, we support the NRA. What? Wait, it was just a few hours ago you were using our money. You were using patrons' money to donate to groups who support reasonable and effective gun control, and now you're pro-NRA? Now you're pro-Second Amendment? Yes, we are. We always been that way. Didn't look like it, but we are. No. It didn't work, folks. It didn't work. And so they issued a Facebook explanation explaining their pro-Second Amendment position and this and that. But here's the problem. They had already let the cat out of the bag. And so Ellen's is not in good standing with the NRA or with the NRA membership now. It was a fairly wild set of events, and pretty unbelievable that they would print that first text on their receipt and then literally go against it 100% and claim to be pro-Second Amendment, pro-NRA. It really doesn't match up, folks. If I can be honest with you, it really doesn't match up. Now, folks, what I'd like to do, I want to mention to you sometimes we get so busy with the news that I end up overlooking the Second Amendment in action. And I want to be sure that I cover this for you. There was a grandma in Pennsylvania who woke up about 4:30 in the morning. And she woke up to the sound of someone trying to break into her door. And she yells at them to get away from her door, get off of her door, this and that. The person ignores the warning and instead breaks through a window, climbs up on outdoor furniture, climbs into the home. Now the person is in the home with a 70-year-old grandmother. She's there alone. She uses a gun. Think about this scenario. She uses a gun that belonged to her late mother. She had never fired the gun. She opens fire on the intruder. He turns to run. She said, when he turned to run, I chased him, and I kept shooting. The intruder is struck. He runs to a nearby car wash, calls 911 to report he's been shot. They get him. They take him to the hospital, but he's also placed in custody. All right? Now, look, folks, here's the deal. When it's over, the grandmother says that maybe this will teach people to, quote unquote, stay the hell away from other people's houses. Folks, this is brought to you by the Second Amendment. This story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. That grandmother is alive today because she had that firearm, and she acknowledges it. After the fact, she said she got a little shaky, and she realized he could have killed me. That's what she said. Folks, you have to love the Second Amendment. So while everything's going on, we got Trump speaking, we have Kyle at the NRA convention, we have Rep. Hudson at the NRA convention, we have Senator Ted Cruz at the NRA convention, with whom I also spoke. We have all these things going on. Outside of that little bubble, you have the common man, the everyday American, the 70-year-old grandma, defending her life from an intruder who was brazen enough to come through her window, even as she warned, stay out of my house, stay out of my house. Folks, this is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Listen, folks, thanks for joining us this week. You've been listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. And listen, have your friends and your family members, your coworkers, have them go to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. Just look up Bullets with AWR Hawkins. You can subscribe. It's free. It'll download to your iPhone every Tuesday. If you have an Android, you can subscribe too. And you can always go to the Breitbart, the main Breitbart page, and you can find the most recent podcast right there every Tuesday, and then it stays up throughout the week. But the podcast will come to your phone every Tuesday if you subscribe. And if you subscribe, please take time to go to the first page there on the subscription area in iTunes and give us some reviews. We need all the 5-star reviews we can get. And between now and the next time we talk, please remember, more guns equal more freedom. Thank you.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.